No matter if points are gained or points are lost, there will be much to discuss. For analysis regarding tonight's Winnipeg Jets game, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve post-game show starts now.
Can you believe that in his first game this season with the Winnipeg Jets, Paul Maurice only played David Gustafsson 2 minutes and 37 seconds? Good evening, Winnipeg. Good evening, Manitoba. And for all those
too soon, Drew,
live this evening on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good evening, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve post-game show with Dave Manouk, with Ezra Ginsburg. I'm your host, Drew Mandel. Pleased to be with you on this Friday night. And don't you hate when these Friday games come and there's just nothing to talk about? What a day in the Winnipeg Jets world, culminating with tonight's 5-2 defeat at the hands of the Washington Capitals. So the change in head coach did not change the results for the Winnipeg Jets on ice. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about the Maurice news. We'll talk about Dave Lowry getting hired, a very busy post-game show, and then, of course, an even busier Saturday morning with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show back here in about 11 hours and 15 minutes time. Gentlemen, you know, the Jets team that was down to 10 forwards by the end of the game, having lost David Gustafsson, who of course only played 5 shifts in the course of the game, was injured late in the first period, and as a result didn't play. I think he took 1 shift in the second period, and that was the end of his night. Then they lost Evgeny Svechnikov, so they were really down a number of forwards. And this is a Jets team, you know, you look at it and the Capitals score, the game-winning goal for the Capitals comes off the stick of Connor Sheary in a very similar play when minutes earlier, Mark Scheifele had a similar opportunity. He's unable to capitalize. Sheary's able to capitalize. That story, the story of the night, the story of recent times for the Winnipeg Jets, just not being able to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of them, whereas their opponents have been able to do so instead.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of this game, right? Like, it was a fairly even game. The first period, thought the Jets were pretty sleepy and the Capitals controlled most of the play. But obviously, you know, the second period was a strong period for the Jets. They tie the game up, and, you know, that winning goal, I mentioned this to Dave. We watched the first 2 periods up in the press box tonight, and it just seemed to me it was one of those games where, like, either the ice wasn't very good or the puck was just rolling a lot. So I think it's kind of fair that, you know, the game-winning goal it's just a lucky bounce, right? Like the Schultz shot, you know, goes off at least a couple of players, right, to Connor Sheary, who obviously, you know, we know he can put the puck in the net. But I mean, that goal was, I mean, Kyle Connor was there with Sheary, and obviously, you know, couldn't lift his stick, couldn't, you know, prevent him from scoring the goal. But I mean, this could have gone either way. You mentioned, you know, the Jets had some really good chances. Vanacek played really well, but yeah, just unfortunate, right? Like, you're hoping to get that coach bump, but you just need these points right now, right? Like, you know that, you know, there's some separation between, you know, the Wild at the top right now and the Jets. The Avalanche have been playing really well over the last several weeks. So, I mean, you need these points, and that just puts even more pressure on this Jets team, right, guys, that to win in St. Louis and then get some points in that back-to-back against Dallas and Nashville. And we know, you know, getting 4 points in a back-to-back is not the easiest thing in the world. Not to say that this Jets team can't do it, but certainly not getting at least a point tonight in Washington stings this team, you know, after the disappointing loss against the Sabres. But I think that, you know, there's a lot to like. I mean, Nick Ehlers was absolutely flying tonight. I thought he was the Jets' best forward. And, you know, not to say that there weren't other players, like, I mean, Lowry Kopp reunited, you know, with Dominic Toninato. I thought he had a strong game. He had some good scoring chances. So, like, overall, you know, I don't think that there's a ton, you know, that you didn't like in this game. Yeah, there were some defensive breakdowns in that first period that you don't like. Hellebuck was excellent. But this was a game that was completely wide open in the third period. And obviously, you know, Washington goes ahead there, but it was a fluky goal. So I don't think that you can necessarily say that this was a bad game, but it's so unfortunate because right now there aren't any moral victories for this team right now.
Dave, I mean, you were next to Ezzy in the press box, and aside from making sure that he only had his requisite and allotted amount of candy, what were your thoughts on the game from high above the ice surface?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a bit disjointed. I mean, you expected a Jets team to come up with a bit of more energy. I think the way this whole thing went down is just very unusual. The fact that it happened today and not in the last 2 days, I find surprising. And I know we're going to talk about the game, then we'll talk about the coaching situation after. But I mean, and I'm not trying to make excuses for the team, but it just seemed like it caught everyone off guard, right? You had nobody really have an inkling of it. The team is in fact expecting Jamie Compon to make his return. His wife, Tina, obviously, who's dealing with her battle with breast cancer, I think it is, in California. So, maybe they're doing better. He's able to come back to Winnipeg. So that's a good sign. And the team was going to get a little bit of a good bounce on his return, given what he's able to do for this team. So I think that was kind of like what the focus was going to be. And then all of a sudden, Paul Maurice is talking to the team and he's saying, I'm done. And again, like I said, Kevin Scheifele off, and he obviously talked about it yesterday. I mean, this is what we've been publicly told. So I don't know. It just seemed to cast a pall. I mean, it was an insane day, like just insane. But especially if you were on a little site called illegalcurve.com, which was up to date with all the latest Winnipeg Jets news that you could use, and video and audio. But
you're good job on that, Dave, on behalf of Drew and I, because
you don't speak for me.
I don't, but I guess on behalf of myself, though, Dave, because there was a lot happening this morning, right? Like I think we were all texting very early this morning, but there was a lot with the Maurice presser and then the Chevy presser and Dave Lowry and players. Yeah. So just wanted to get that in. Dave, you were putting in work.
All right, thanks, Big Daddy. But anyway, so it was a busy morning, and it just, like I said, it just seemed to, I don't want to say cast a pall, but it did a little bit, right? Like, I mean, you could see it in the body language of the players during their availability this morning. Who said that? I don't know what Steven's talking about. That's not. If that was the case, we'd have a lot more paid advertisers, Steven. Steven's saying that you have to be a paid advertiser.
I put it up there strictly to prove him wrong.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
We're an equal opportunity.
I would say
comment
Steve,
poster.
But I will tell Steven, when I'm in charge of doing it, which is half the time, Drew does the other half. Then maybe that with Drew's such situation, that could be true. Not with me. I don't think like that. Anyways, back to the game. So I don't know. It seemed like listening to the players, like everybody just seemed like a bit like a zombie, and it just seemed like a lot. And I'm, again, like I said, it doesn't make excuses. You knew what you needed to do. This team needed to win, and you had a Capitals team that was missing Kuznetsov, Backstrom, Wilson. Like, they had a lot of guys out of their lineup tonight.
2/3 of their first line. The first line's usually Kuznetsov, Wilson, Ovechkin, right, Dave?
That's right. So it's not as if you were dealing with don't get me wrong, the Capitals are a better team than the Jets, right? They've got more points. They've got more wins. They are first in the Metropolitan, or they were tied for first. It was a 3-way tie in the Metro last I checked. I don't know where this win would put them. So you weren't going up against the Washington team that's bad. And Ezzy and I were talking about it after when we were talking about the game on the way to back to my place during the second intermission. And we were saying, like, even with those guys missing, still not a bad team. You still got a good, Capitals team. So this was definitely not like a loss against, the Coyotes or the Sabres. But at the same time, like, you needed to be in this game. And I know that, obviously, what's his name played very well in net.
Vitek Vanacek.
Yeah, but he was very good. He made some
former
excellent
Seattle
saves.
Kraken goaltender Vitek Vanacek.
Yeah, very, very brief. I hope you didn't buy a jersey. But I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, the Jets, like I said, you're not going to judge everything after one game. You don't say, okay, well, this is what the Jets are based on Dave Lowry's, leadership or what he is as a coach because of this one game. Like I said, I think he has a little more window, at least I would think, for him to be able to put his own stamp on the team, get, a practice in tomorrow, they have an afternoon game on Sunday, and then he'll take the team on the road on next week.
To your point, though, you would have thought that the Jets may have been a little bit more excited starting the game, and the first period ended in 0-0, and it was a first period. I thought the Capitals were the better of the two teams, certainly outshooting the Jets 14-8 in the first period. And then this Jets team gets trails 2-0. They get down 2-0, and to their credit, they fight back. But this isn't a team right now that can afford to go down by 2 goals. Everything is so difficult for them right now that trailing almost just allows not allows them to collapse, because they didn't collapse. So they get credit for fighting a little bit to come back in this game, but it's so difficult for them to do anything right now, to have any sort of anything positive to hold on to, that when you go down 2-0, and then Scheifele fails to capitalize on that golden opportunity to give the Jets the lead, and then what happens is Connor Sheary capitalizes on his opportunity. Boom, it's 3-2, and you could see the team even sag a little bit more at that point in time. Everything is difficult right now for this Winnipeg Jets team. Obviously they made the coaching change. Dave Lowry is, well, we'll talk about what we think of that decision and everything else. I mean, it's too soon to say, if it's a good decision or if it's a bad decision. I have my thoughts on it, and I, of course, will share them tonight, and I'll share them again tomorrow morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, 9 a.m. back here on our YouTube channel. But this team is just, it's still, they're not where they need to be as a unit. And it was really interesting to me after Ovechkin scored the 5-2 empty netter, which is really just a lip service empty netter. It's 4-2. The Jets weren't coming back in the game.
But an important goal for Ovechkin, though, because he'll take every single goal he can get.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great for Ovechkin.
On the way up the Gretz ladder.
Exactly right. I got no problem with that whatsoever. It's exciting to see him score any goal. But go back and watch the video after this, and you'll see, and I couldn't tell exactly. I think it was Andrew Kopp. So Neil Pionk is sort of trying to, play defense there, and he's sort of the defenseman who's trying to knock the puck away or whatever. It ends up on Ovechkin's stick, and Ovechkin puts it into the empty net. Go back and look at, like I said, I think it's Kopp. He sort of raises his arms up in the air and just is very exasperated. And it looked to me like he's a guy who's not exasperated at the situation in general, but that he was exasperated at a certain teammate. And I don't know who that teammate is, and I could be extrapolating something and reading something into something that isn't there. But go back and watch the video if you get an opportunity, and you'll see body language that to me is more concerning than just a 5-2 goal into an empty net.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I did notice that, Drew. I'll admit I don't know exactly what he was upset about, but there's no doubt. I'm not
even 100% certain that it was Andrew Kopp. I mean, I couldn't catch the number.
I thought it was Pionk, but I mean,
well, there was two guys there. There was Pionk, and it was Pionk and Kopp were the two guys back, and Pionk was in the play, and Kopp was just trying to, I guess, knock down the puck. But you gotta, I couldn't for sure say that it was Kopp, but I'm pretty sure it was. Anyways, go on.
But regardless, right, Drew? Like, regardless if it was Pionk or Kopp or a different player, maybe it was Ehlers, says Dan Miller. So thanks for that, Dan. But the point is that there's a lot of frustration. So you like to see that, right? Like, you like to see a team frustrated when they lose 5-2 on home ice when they've been struggling, right? But I think it shows you also, back to your point about how nothing really seems to be going right, because anybody that watched that game, guys, would say that was a fairly even game, right? Like, and a lot of hockey games are in the NHL, right? Like, yeah, you get the odd blowout, like the Jets were blown out by the Wild, but for the most part, you're going to get 1 or 2 goal games here, and the Jets were very much in this game. And you're right, you don't want to spot a team when you're at home, a 2-goal lead when you're struggling, right? Like, we know the first goal in hockey is important always, no matter what. Doesn't matter if you're at home or on the road, or if it's the regular season or the playoffs or the preseason. But I think you're right, especially for a Jets team that we know they really feed off of the first goal, right? Like, they can score goals in bunches. We've seen that many times this year, maybe not as much as the Jets would like, but yeah, they were chasing the game a little bit. And even though, you come back and tie it up, I mean, it's just, right now, when you don't have, Scheifele, converting those chances when, Connor's not scoring at the same clip, right? Like Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's obviously having a fantastic season, but he's not scoring as much as he was during that streak that he had, right? So, I mean, there's just a lot of inconsistencies that you continue to see, right? Like, even though, some of these goals, like you wouldn't say, it was defensive breakdown. The first goal that was scored was definitely a defensive breakdown, right? And that was Brett Leeson's goal.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of the same old thing. It's not like anything happened tonight that was different than what we've seen from this Jets team over the last, let's say month and a half. But like, you were at a point where it doesn't even really matter how you win games. Like, they have to just start winning games, guys, because, for example, if you go, 1-2 here or 0-3 here, you're going into the Christmas break like at a serious disadvantage in the Central Division. The Central Division is an absolute logjam right now, and you're battling with Nashville, and you're battling. Well, Nashville won 6 in a row.
Ezzy. Sorry, it's not anymore. You look at the logjam. The logjam is at the top 4. You have Minnesota with 40 points, St. Louis with 39, Nashville with 37, Colorado with 36. Colorado has 2 games in hand on the Jets. Then there's a 5-point gap between Colorado and the Jets. That's not a logjam anymore. The Jets are going to have to climb a significant mountain, Dave, and there's no evidence that this team is in the right space to do that. And so, the move that happens today happens, and had it not happened today, I would not have been surprised if it happened tomorrow morning when we were on the air with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, because everything happens on Saturday mornings. But this Jets team isn't in that mushy middle anymore. They're in that bottom, forget about, Arizona and Chicago, of course, but the Jets and Dallas are a significant step behind the top 4 in the Central Division, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this now, Drew, for a while, and this is a situation that you can't afford to be in. Think about it with that 9-3-3 start, right? Or not start, but when they went 9-3-3,
yeah,
you built yourself a cushion, and now the Jets have they gave up the cushion, and they gave up the couch, they gave up the bed, they gave up everything. They got nowhere to lounge anymore. This is a team that just can't afford to do that, and we've talked about it for a long time, and you could see it, right? Like, okay, you could wash away a 1-0 game against the Coyotes because, their goalie played phenomenal. That's fine. You try and get rid of a 7-1 pumping by the Wild. Well, that's, an outlier. Okay, fine, but it starts to build and it starts to add up. And now, those wins aren't 2 wins and then a loss. And, it's one of the things I think Sean Reynolds was asking Paul Maurice about that idea of last year. This team didn't lose 2 games in a row, or at least they didn't until the end when they went on that little bit of a stinky roll. But the reality is that they generally were able to bounce back after a loss. This year's team isn't doing that. This year's team just isn't doing it. And so, who knows what it is, but right now, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Mark Scheifele needs to be the driver of this team. I'm saying if he wants to be the guy that he talks about, the guy that Paul Maurice said he could be, well, we're not seeing that. We haven't been seeing it all year long. And you've seen it from Pierre-Luc Dubois. You've seen it from Kyle Connor. You've seen it from Nikolai Ehlers to a certain degree. He gets hot and cold a little bit, but he's been good. And then the guy who needs to be right there alongside those 3 that I just mentioned is Mark Scheifele. And if Mark Scheifele, remember, guys, I mean, the whole thing we talked about was if Pierre-Luc Dubois bounces back, and we've had Craig Button on, and he talked about how the Jets would have the best center depth in the NHL, or the top 3 centers, and potentially, obviously, a Stastny or a Kopp thrown in there as well. But you have with Scheifele, Dubois, and Lowry. They don't look like the best 3 centers, and Adam Lowry's having a disappointing season with 3 goals and 2 assists. So you're not getting the production, and that's the one thing we've talked about. Like, it's not just about getting production from Mark Scheifele. This is a team game. And I said to Ezzy at one point, and I don't know if the people in the chat agree, but like I said, the Jets have a talented team, talented players, but they're not playing like a team. They're playing like a bunch of individual players a lot of the time. And so that think that they can single-handedly get stuff done and not win as a group. And that's what it seems to me as someone who observes these games and pays attention to what's happening on the ice. And it's just unfortunate because, like I said, you need contributions up and down the lineup, and you're not getting it. You're not getting it from your third line, because your third line, look, we talked about it. In today's NHL, you can't have a third line that doesn't produce. You need to be able to put the puck in the back of the net. If you're not doing it, and it's only your first two lines, and then your first one or two of those lines goes cold, and then you've got a team that's defensively strong that's going to be able to check out your one line, well, then you guys are screwed, right? Because you don't play your fourth. And obviously today, what doesn't really count because Gustafsson got hurt in the second period, and so he didn't play much in the second, obviously. And then Svechnikov gets hurt, so now you're down two forwards. And, that could set up a whole, and I haven't been on Twitter, so I haven't been paying attention to what's going on, if there was an update from Dave Lowry. And look, I mean, let's be realistic, guys. I mean, I was fully on board with David Gustafsson being recalled, but I was also the same person who said, he's not going to be Kyle Connor. He's not going to come up and score 50 goals for the Winnipeg Jets. He's going to be a defensively sound guy who should be playing on your PK and will be able to be solid 5-on-5. But he wasn't going to come up there and score 50 goals. So people have to realize he wasn't coming to save the Winnipeg Jets. He was going to maybe help them on the penalty kill, which was an area of concern for them, obviously. But it wasn't there to be the savior of this team. So I'm just saying, obviously getting David Gustafsson in the lineup and getting going was important, but he wasn't coming up to be the guy. The guy needed to be Mark Scheifele. Those are the guys.
Yeah, the guys just going to say about Gustafsson, Dave, just unfortunate that, that injury occurs, right? And we don't think it's serious. I don't think, there's no reason to believe that that's going to be anything long-term, but it's just unfortunate because, he's played so well down with the Moose that, he finally gets the call up, right? Wheeler's out. He gets the call up, the COVID, protocol, that's not an issue. And, he only gets to play the one period, right? So it's just unfortunate. And then you throw in Svechnikov, right? Connor Dubois and Svechnikov, they were so good earlier in the season. And then Svechnikov leaves the game. It just, to me, again, feelings, you can say whatever you want about feelings. I'm not talking about our skeletons in the closet and those types of feelings about our childhood. I'm talking about, feelings in terms of, feeling out a hockey game. And we just didn't get the feeling, I think, that, the Jets were going to pull this one out, not only because, the Caps took the early lead, but just because of, what was happening. Kopp ended up playing, I believe, more than any other forward because he was playing on the PK and on the power play. But, I thought he was struggling a little bit out there at times, just in terms
25. You're right. The most minutes of any player in tonight's game, 23-25 for Andrew Kopp.
Yeah, and that's not a surprise, like we said, because we know that he gets to go out there on both special teams units. But Kopp, Lowry, and Toninato, I think you saw glimpses of how that line could work, right? It goes back to what Drew was saying earlier, right? Dave Lowry, you would have hoped to get that first win, right? All eyes were on the Jets, right? After Paul Maurice resigned earlier today, everybody was expecting that bump. But really, guys, this isn't about, one game here. This is, as Drew said, it's going to be an uphill battle. Teams like Nashville, Colorado, Minnesota, they've started to pull away here, and the Jets don't have any other option aside from putting together some wins. And it starts with, the next game against the Blues.
Well, that's the...
I'm just going to jump in on the question here in the chat.
Sure.
We just had the, people are asking, who would you go to?
Yeah, so let me just read the question for the people on the pod who will listen to the podcast after. Lockport Cowboys all-star quarterback, that's a hell of a username, asked who would be the next forward called up if David Gustafsson can't go, because there is no healthy forwards with the Winnipeg Jets, of course, with Wheeler injured and Gustafsson getting called up and he's injured. And I guess, again, for the people who are listening to the podcast after, courtesy Mitchell Clinton of Jets TV, Dave Lowry said it's sort of too soon to know about Gustafsson and Evgeny Svechnikov. They're going to get looked at tonight and tomorrow. And so maybe there'll be an update tomorrow after the Winnipeg Jets practice. And that news, of course, will be available on illegalcurve.com.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of guys that you could call up. I mean, Jeff Malott is having a good season. He's up to 7 goals. He's a guy who the Jets signed to an NHL deal after he had a great first year pro last year with the Moose. Christian Reichel is probably one of the hardest working Jets. He's, and he's a right shot, so that probably helps because the Jets don't have a ton of right shots. Mikey Esimont, he's had to deal with some COVID situation earlier in the season, but he's a good goal scorer. And Austin Baganski, who looked good in preseason for the Jets, and kind of got off to a very slow start for the Moose. He's heated up and he's been playing much better. And then CJ Cease is another guy who's reliable. It's kind of like that, decent 200-foot forward who you could call up. So the Jets the Moose have some players that they could call up. I think Jeff Malott is a guy, he goes to the inner slot a lot. He's not afraid, 6'3", 6'4", something like that. So he's a big boy, not afraid to get greasy. And he's probably a guy they want to take a look at the NHL level. So he'd be one who's like Baganski and Esimon are guys who have already, played some years. They're more veteran than him, but a guy like Esimon or, like I said, Christian Reichel, another guy who he and Gustin have formed quite a good relationship with. So he's one of the hardest working Jets, Moose. So he would be a guy again who could also, and obviously Cole Perfetti, not an option because he's with Canada at the World Juniors.
Well, and that's the irony is that, of course, of all those players, and those guys are nice stories, but those guys have never been NHL regulars. They are.
Hey, Mike Scarbosa scored a goal and assist tonight.
It's almost like having Riley Nash would be a good thing right now, right, Drew?
Well, I wouldn't go. I don't think Riley Nash is any different than any of those guys. The truth is, there's the solution to what ails the Winnipeg Jets, as you've said, and as Ezzy has said, and as I've said, starts with Mark Scheifele. If you have to pinpoint one player who's not living up to their expectations, it is the Jets' alleged number one center and a guy who considers himself to be one of the best centermen in the NHL. He's having his worst professional year since he's established himself in that realm of tremendous hockey players, taking away sort of that first year where, let's say, anything like that. That's, be fair with our comparisons. He's having his worst professional season for the Winnipeg Jets, and it's the year that the Jets probably need him the most. And can he flip that switch? Can he find whatever has been ailing him and rectify it and, become the leader that the Winnipeg Jets need and become the driver that the rest of the team can sort of fall behind in and be the example? That's what they need. They need an example. And Mark Scheifele, more nights than not this year, has not been a positive example for his teammates to follow. And I don't know if it's a function of when he had COVID-19, or I don't know if it's a function of anything lingering mentally after the Jake Evans hit. But for whatever reason it is, they need him to be that guy, or this season's going to be over by New Year's.
He's not the Scheifele that we're used to seeing, as you said. Since he established himself, in his second or third year as a preeminent, first line center in the NHL, it just doesn't look like the old Scheifele. And it's not just about points, because he's got, 16 or 17 points. It's not just points, it's his overall game. Like, he played again, I think it was around, 22, 23 minutes. And the thing is, he was really good in the game against Toronto, really good in those back-to-back games against the Kraken and the Canucks. Wasn't very good, obviously, against the Sabres. And, he was pretty good tonight, but pretty good is not something that you would say about Scheifele last year. That's just not something you would say.
I know plus minus is a bit of a BS stat, and I get that. But, -4 is hard to sugarcoat or say that he was, a driver, for the Winnipeg Jets tonight. And that's just been the reality of it, Dave, more often than not. And that's really what the Jets need to tap into. That's what Dave Lowry, his first job as head coach of this team is to figure out how to get Mark Scheifele going. Can he do it? Well, prove me wrong. I'm skeptical. He was the assistant coach on this team already. You would have think that if he'd been able to do it, he would have already done it as the assistant coach. But maybe he's a miracle worker when he's got the HC next to his name and as opposed to the AC. But that's
just 1 second though, Drew, because I know what what your point is, but doesn't Mark Scheifele have to get Mark Scheifele going? Like,
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I know what you're saying. Like, I mean, a coach is responsible for all the players on his team, but like, this isn't a 22-year-old we're talking about here. This is a 28-year-old man who's an NHL veteran at this point. And as you mentioned before, and you're right, like this is a guy who is a point-a-game player up until like this year. He's not a point-a-game player, but you know what I mean? Up until this year. And he leads by example. He's a play driver. And I think there's a lot of responsibility. Like, again, it's not all on Mark Scheifele. Like, the Jets, lack of success, over the last, 13, 14 games, we talked about it, 4-8-2, right? In their last 14, I believe, something like that. They've been under 500 their last 14 games. Like, it's not all on Scheifele. There's defensive breakdowns and, other players on this team have to own it. But he's also got to be the one that kind of finds that extra gear. And to me, Drew, sorry, I kind of, stole your thunder here, but what I think is the most, surprising and confusing for Jets fans is you've seen that Scheifele, for a couple of games in a row, 3 games in a row. Like I mentioned, those games against Seattle and Vancouver on the road, when the Jets got 3 of 4 points, Scheifele, Connor, and Wheeler were absolutely flying out there. So, what changed in 7 days? It's just hard to really put your finger on it, right, Dave?
Only thing you should be putting your finger on is the like button, according to Kenny's water bottle. I agree with Kenny. That is 100% right. It is shameful. Because remember, even if you're mad at the Winnipeg Jets, it doesn't mean you're mad at Illegal Curve. And we're doing the show. Well, we like doing the show, but we're doing the show and we want you to smash that like button because then that algorithm gets going. It gets churning. Things are happening.
Do you think some people watching right now are kind of undecided? Like they're like, I don't know if those icy guys deserve that like. I'm just not sure. Hit the like button. Come on. You're watching. You like us. Hit that like button.
Exactly.
Just do the right thing.
So
that's all we ask.
Do what feels right.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done that before as well. Also subscribe to our podcast. You can get that wherever you get your best podcast.
And comment on our podcast.
That's right. Rate us, review us, comment on us. Let us know what you think of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show and the Illegal Curve Post-Game Show. A reminder, we go live with the Illegal Curve Post-Game Show after each and every Winnipeg.
I tried to get
Jets
a haircut
game.
yesterday, Mr. Lib, but they didn't have a convenient time for me.
They didn't have a convenient time to shave a baboon. Is that what happened?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope that it doesn't go back to the COVID restrictions. You guys remember what happened last time? I had to get, I think her name was Kristen, came over to my house to give me a haircut because they wouldn't do my beard because of the public health orders. So hopefully,
yeah, that's what they told you.
So you violated the public health orders by having someone in your house instead. Great
example.
No.
That did not violate public health orders. You were allowed to do that at the time. I checked.
Okay. Good. Just want to make clear there, as he's a law-abiding citizen, except for all the other times where he's not been a law-abiding citizen. But we can talk about that.
I don't mess around with public health orders.
I know.
I mean, Dr. Brent Rusin could be watching, Drew. We don't want to mess around here.
It's true. We certainly don't want to mess around, and we don't want to talk about COVID either, because I'm sure, like everybody else, we're all sick of talking about it. So we'll talk about the Winnipeg Jets. We'll talk about Mark Scheifele. We'll talk about the defeat of the Winnipeg Jets at the hands of the Washington Capitals by a 5-2 margin. The Winnipeg Jets dropped further in the Central Division standings down to 13, 11, and 5. Let's take our commercial break. When we come back, much more on what has been a very newsy day in the world of the Winnipeg Jets. Don't go anywhere. Smash the like button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be right back after we pay some bills. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Post-Game Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the biggest acts and all the up-and-comers. They've all made their mark at Rumors Comedy Club, North America's longest-running independent comedy club. Rumors has kept Winnipeg laughing for over 25 years. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party, even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
He winds up. Oh! Looks like Ezzy took that one right in the choppers.
A blistering fast puck hurts like HE double hockey sticks. That's why I let the pros at Linden Market Dental Center turn my yow into
wow.
Get your brilliant smile back with state-of-the-art restorative and cosmetic dentistry from real pros.
And remember, always wear a mouth guard.
Now that's solid on ice advice. Learn more at lindenmarketdentalcenter.com. Creating smiles for life.
Whoa, Ezzy, everything okay? You look stressed.
Of course I'm stressed. We're moving, the house is upside down, the kids failed miserably at packing the fine china, and my life is in chaos. Chaos!
Yes, that does sound like a problem.
What am I going to do?
Ezzy, relax. Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage is the answer. With 60 years of experience in moving Manitobans and a track record of exemplary customer service, one call to Rolly's and your stress is gone. No job is too big or too small. Just visit Rollies.com and they will take it from there.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you, Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage, online at Rollies.com.
Hey boys, finding parking on game day shouldn't take longer than the Minute Minute.
It shouldn't take longer than 1 minute?
Yeah, less than a minute? I spend at least 20 driving around to find street parking, or if I'm in a rush to the game, I'll shovel out 20 at a parkade.
You're both doing it wrong. There's this app called Grid Park. It lets you find and pre-book your parking spot on game days, and you can reserve your spot up to 1 month in advance. And guess how much you'll pay?
Tell me, Dave. You know I love a deal.
Ezzy, $5.
Come on, $5?
Yeah, and it's just 2 blocks from the arena.
The Grid Park app?
Yep, spelled GRYD Park. And you know what else?
There's more?
Our listeners get their first park free with the code FIRSTPARK.
Wow, so they just download the Grid Park app and pre-book their next game day spot for free?
Yeah, you got it, Ez. Promo code FIRSTPARK. Only on the Grid Park app.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Whether it's watching the game with friends, pizza night with the family, or date night for two, this holiday season, give the gift of special occasions. Get a free $10 promo card when you buy a $50 gift card from Boston Pizza. Because nobody regifts pizza.
For 3 generations and over 80 years, Tough Duck has been making apparel that works and plays as hard as the people who wear it. From jackets to work boots and everything in between, Tough Duck's clothing can handle the harshest environments, even the Illegal Curve hockey show. Work to live, live to play. Visit toughduck.com. 20 minutes after the hour, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, and a big welcome aboard to Grid Park, the newest sponsor here of the Illegal Curve post-game show. Big thanks to them for their support. Big thanks to all of our sponsors for their support. They make the post-game show. They make tomorrow's Illegal Curve Hockey Show. They make the website, illegalcurve.com, a possibility. So support these fine businesses because of their support of Illegal Curve Hockey. If you know of a business or if you have a business that you think should be advertising with us, send us an email, dave@illegalcurve.com, ezra@illegalcurve.com, or you can reach out to yours truly, drew@illegalcurve.com, and we'll hook you up with all the latest information about joining our great roster of sponsors. Talking about the Jets' defeat at the hands of the Washington Capitals, a 5-2 loss, a disappointing start to the Dave Lowry era for the Winnipeg Jets. Guys, it's obviously been it was a surprising announcement earlier today. This came out of left field. None of us expected the word resignation to be in our email inboxes early this morning. What are your thoughts, I guess, on the decision by Paul Maurice to resign at this stage of the season?
Yeah. Well, first off, I mean, I think what was maybe the most surprising about today's announcement is that it happened hours before a game. right? And there were multiple days between games, right? The Buffalo game and tonight's game. But at the point of the season, right? Like, look, something has to give here, guys, because, you go back to training camp, beginning of the season, there were a lot of people that were picking this Jets team to be a Stanley Cup winner. And I'll mention that I picked the Islanders, who are in the basement of the Metro Division. So obviously, I'll throw in my bad predictions with, some of the other bad predictions. And again, it's not to say that the Jets can't, turn their season around and win the Stanley Cup. But I think, the expectations were so sky high that when you compare where the Jets are at right now to those expectations, I think it's not something that a lot of people saw coming. I certainly didn't see this coming. I think a lot of Jets fans thought, the Jets would be duking it out for first in the Central as opposed to a wild card spot, right? So, yeah, it's not surprising, Drew, that it happened now, but it is surprising how it happened. I didn't see it happening as resignation. I thought it would have been a firing. And to be honest with you, like I was talking to Mike McIntyre, during the first intermission about his question to Chevy, because he asked him, was this just a way for Paul Maurice to leave the organization, without the Jets, firing him? And he did dodge the question at first, but Mike said, like, if you kind of re-listen to the Chevy answer, I mean, you kind of wonder, was a firing imminent? And we'll never know that answer. But I mean, it sounds like, put it this way, I mean, everything, I thought Maurice was an absolute class act, by the way, and he is a class act. So I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. But just as, as kind of a non sequitur here, like the one thing that surprised me the most in that press conference was when Maurice said that, he lost the passion for the game. That kind of, when he said that kind of made me pause, because, he's a guy that obviously lives, breathes, and eats hockey, just like most, players, coaches, everybody, us, media. So to hear that from him was really surprising. So it's not as much, as the point of the season as, him resigning, because you just don't see coaches in any sport really resign very often. Usually we know coaches are hired to be fired. So, I mean, maybe because Paul Maurice has been here for 8 years and because of his relationship with Chevy and Chipman, it's different than, say it would be for, Alain Vigneault in Philadelphia, for example, or, Travis Green in Vancouver, just pointing out the two most recent, firings in the NHL, right? So it was more so that, we expected it to be a firing. But I thought, what Maurice said, in the press conference, that this is a good day for, him and the Jets. He's basically, admitting, not basically, he was admitting that, it's time for a new voice. But when he was saying that he didn't love coming to the rink anymore, that's just not something I ever expected to hear from Maurice or any other hockey coach for that matter.
Well, I agree with you. It certainly is, those aren't words you expected to hear. I mean, to me, Dave, that, if Paul Maurice had been behind the bench tonight and the Jets had lost 5-2, I think that his career as the Jets head coach was probably coming to an end tomorrow morning.
Okay.
I mean, it seemed like if you, that was what I took away from Kevin Cheveldayoff's comments. And he would, Chevy would never be crystal clear about that, because he's never been crystal clear about anything when he speaks to the media.
What would you like to order for dinner, Mr. Cheveldayoff? Well, I don't know. I mean, it really depends on what there is to eat for dinner.
Yeah. Let's discuss about dinner as a concept. Is dinner a real thing, or is it supper?
You're always talking about dinner, but are you actually ever really eating dinner? And then
it's food in, food out, guys.
I mean, so yes, Maurice resigned on his own and everything else, but he probably, I mean, it was done. I mean, this was, you can't fire me, I quit. That sort of scenario, I think was clearly at play here. It's just the timing. It's just odd. He talked about how tough last year was, and he talked about this summer, talking to Kevin Cheveldayoff and talking to Mark Chipman about maybe there needing to be a new voice, especially after how the series against Montreal ended. You wonder if this Jets team, waited too long. Should they have done this in the offseason if he didn't have the passion?
It's almost like they had a coach waiting in the wings who they could have promoted from within to come and be the new
you're talking about Pascal Vincent.
Ah, yes, Pascal Vincent.
I mean, who certainly would probably
who got most of these players into the from the American Hockey League into the National Hockey League.
To me though, is you have to look to the West Coast. You got to look to Vancouver. If this was inevitable, and for a long time now, it seemed like it's been inevitable. What does this team look like with Bruce Boudreau behind the bench? Not to say that Dave Lowry can't do it, because I don't know. Maybe he can. Maybe Dave Lowry turns into be a great NHL head coach. This is his first NHL head coaching experience. He's never been anything other than an assistant here, and he was a head coach in the Western Hockey League, most recently with the Brandon Wheat Kings. But timing in life is everything. And I think for a lot of people, and a lot of people who want to coach with a track record of success, Bruce Boudreau was sitting right there, but you're a day late and a dollar short now. And all of a sudden, the Vancouver Canucks, a team that most people were making fun of, are a point behind you in the Western Conference, albeit you have two games in hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point, Drew. And I think, look, there's question as to whether you would want a young, young from an NHL experience, like a guy like Pascal Vincent, obviously well known within the organization, had a lot of success bringing those guys up from the minor leagues. But would that voice work, or do they need a guy who's a hard ass coach like Bruce Boudreau, who's not going to put up with any shit, and he's going to keep these? I mean, again, like
he does is win.
I mean, especially in the regular season, right? I mean, his playoff track record not necessarily as equal to his regular season track record, but the truth is he does, and I think he's a heck of a coach. So I mean, Bruce Boudreau, maybe as he's reverse curse is going to get Barry Trotz available. I mean, Dolphin.
Yeah, work with the Bombers in the Grey Cup, right, boys?
Yeah, that's true. Barry Trotz would not exactly be a name that anyone I think would shy away from, because he's a hell of a coach, probably one of the best in the NHL. So
I don't think he's going anywhere, Dave. Sorry.
No, I don't think so either. But I think what it comes down to is
Lou Lamoriello's never been shy about firing head coaches, though.
Well, that's true.
That would be a shocker, though. That would be a shocker.
Yeah. So I think what it comes down to, though, is like going back to this, what we talked about, the idea of, the way it went down today. And, I was shocked, I will say, from the point of view that it happened on a game day when you had 2 practice days available after the Buffalo game. Even if you were like, you would have given it some pause, some thought on the day after the Buffalo loss. But then you had yesterday, and you went through the practice, and you gave no sort of, indication that there was anything amiss. Like I said, we've got the availability, right there from yesterday. It's on the website, illegalcurve.com. And so it's like I said, it's one of those weird situations where, to me, you have a guy who just did it this morning when it just didn't make a lot of sense, right? Like you had to do it on a game day throws everything off. And it's not as if it's clear, like these guys didn't know, right? Like the team didn't know that he was going to do this. It sounds like all the players off guard that this was happening, right? Blake Wheeler came in, Paul Maurice spoke to him, then he spoke to the team. So I just don't understand the chronology of decision-making from Kevin Cheveldayoff and Paul Maurice, because it's not as if he doesn't have the ability to stand in and coach one more game. He could have coached today's game at least. And then even if he had that conversation, okay, coach today's game, give it some thought, then Lowry can take over on Saturday, have a practice with the team, and then they'll play on Sunday afternoon. So to me, it was just very curious to make that decision when you had that luxury of time where there was really, practices or whatever. You could have canceled the practice and just given the team the day off, even though you wanted to work them, based on the fact that they'd lost the game to Buffalo the way they did. But at the same time, I just didn't understand why all of a sudden on a game day, suddenly this is going down the way it did. So very unusual to my eye. Like I said, look, Paul Maurice, the human being, is a good human being. There's no question about it. And Paul Maurice always spoke very well of Winnipeg and did his best to represent our city. And so I don't have a problem with Paul Maurice, the human. Some of the coaching decisions he made were curious, and at times you can call that into question, but you don't call into question his character. I don't, at least, because like I said, I think he always spoke well and acquitted himself well in terms of representing the city of Winnipeg and that sort of thing. And he embraced it. So for that, you have to credit him. But like I said, that doesn't make him immune from criticism either, of course. No. But like I said, now that you don't to me, it was an interesting tenure here in Winnipeg, in the being the second longest head coach in the, right behind John Cooper. But, and the other thing I want to touch on were Kevin Cheveldayoff's comments. But his comments.
Before, I just want to make a note of the comment that's on the screen. If you think the Jets have a coaching plan, you're lying to yourself. This is crisis management, which is mismanagement. And I think there might be some truth to the comment that I'm displaying on the screen. And, because to your point, Dave, as you were talking about the timelines and the way this unfolded today is just so bizarre that you wonder, you wonder how it came to be. If this was the plan, if this is sort of the, if this is how they planned it, and Maurice resigned truly on his own, why doesn't he resign after Tuesday's game? And then, when I saw that he bag skated the Jets on Wednesday, and the Jets deserve to be bag skated, don't get me wrong, but bag skating at the NHL level is the last ditch effort of a desperate coach. And I know people say bag skate them all the time. They played poorly, bag skate them. They're professionals. When you bag skate them, to me, it's you're out of other ideas as a head coach. And so there was a lot of bells ringing before that, especially how the team has played as of late. But when they bag skated them on Wednesday, that was, to me, a screaming from the mountaintops sign that something was going to happen. But the fact that it took until Friday, a game day, is to your point, Dave, very, very bizarre. You were saying about Kevin Cheveldayoff? Yeah, no, I just thought his comments to the team, well, at least what he told the media, were interesting. Just the idea that he said, this is on you. And you guys have to do this. It's not about a coach, this is the players. The players are the only ones who can affect change. I mean, the reality is I think it's the entire group of them. I mean, the coaching staff has to put a system into place, but systems in hockey aren't that complicated for the most part. So, and they're not that, they don't deviate that significantly from one team to another. So it is on the players. And look, this is the way the team is composed, and they're a cap team, right? Obviously, Sans Wheeler's $8.3 million. He's not on LTIR yet. No, I know he's not on LTIR because it's, quote, weeks, not days.
Easy, they're cap friendly.
And then the other thing that's also interesting is that, if you think about it, there should be an update on him because it was 3 to 4 days after
to get the swelling down.
So I would expect some sort of update on Blake Wheeler in the next little while. We'll find out about his status. So there are, 3 players that are going to be of interest in terms of healing. And, that'll be, of course, relevant to the Manitoba Moose and who they lose. The Moose, speaking of losing, did lose tonight in Iowa 4-1. So the Moose,
save it for the Moose Minute tomorrow, my friend.
I believe I'm giving a Moose Minute right now, Drew, because it's going to be a quick one. Because remember, the Moose are playing 3-3, which means if I
Drew, you can't stop a Manuk Moose Minute.
Which means if I do it tomorrow,
Dave starts a Moose Minute,
it's a runaway train.
If I do it tomorrow, that means I have to do 3 games in 3 days. It's just not very realistic. Well, technically, I'd have to talk about the third game.
What are you talking about? What's the difference between doing it tonight and doing it tomorrow morning? Are they playing overnight?
No, because I'll have
people want it tonight, Drew. That's what the difference is.
That's the whole point. T. Conapauli's already saying Moose. If T. Conapauli's telling you the Moose, you just give T. Conapauli what he wants. Otherwise, you have to give T. Cona. Mess with Paulie. The Moose, the Moose.
Yeah, don't mess with Paulie, or you're going to have flamingos on your front lawn, Drew.
Exactly. So the Moose were into Chicago for the school day game yesterday morning, and it's probably one of the most fun games. Kids bust in there, and they're just yelling and screaming the entire game. Moose got off to a really good start, built up a 3-1 lead. The Wolves lost 3 of their top scorers to Carolina because the Hurricanes are dealing with a COVID outbreak, so they were in Detroit. So they called up 3 of their top guys. And Chicago's the number 1 team in the Central Division. The Moose are chasing them. They were 5 points back. And so no Antlers today. Kind of done with the Antlers. The Antlers are fun. I don't know where they are. They're somewhere over there. But Chicago is the number one team.
When you have a house as big as Dave's palatial palace, you know,
True.
you lose the antlers. You know, they get.
I blame Drew. I think he flogged the antlers.
Anyways, but the Moose were also down. Obviously, they lost David Gustafson to the recall and Cole Perfetti at camp. So both teams were sawing some key players for them. But the Moose looked like they were in control. They took a 3-1 lead into the third period, and they were heavily penalized yesterday, and uncharacteristically so. So they ended up taking 7 penalties in total, and despite the fact that they have the third or fourth best penalty killing unit in the AHL, they ended up giving up one. And it was a 3-2. They gave up a late goal in the second period. So then it was 3-2, and then they gave up the game time goal on the power play to make it 3-3. And so you thought, okay, well, it's going to be an overtime game. It's not bad against a really good Chicago team, which had won 9 in a row. And then they scored a goal. It's on my Twitter. That was ridiculous. It shouldn't have. I mean, it was basically with 5 seconds left at the blue line. I think it was Josh Levo. Comes in, and Leon Gavanke, the 2017 fifth rounder, probably wants it back. He was caught a little flat-footed, and Mikkel Burden probably needs to make that save. But with 1 second to go in the game, the Moose give up the game and end up losing 4-3. So that was
something only the Jets did. So
apparently it's actually very rare. I have to say, it's actually very rare for the Moose. It's I think I wrote the word uncharacteristic of the Manitoba Moose to give up a loss like that. So it was maybe it's a downward thing. The Jets are setting down bad vibes. But anyways, so the Moose got off to a bad start to this road trip. It's a 5-gamer. They've got 2 in Iowa. They had 1 this evening. It's hard to watch both, obviously, because we're trying to watch Jets game and the Moose game a little bit. But they started off okay. CJC's opened the scoring, but then it was all Iowa from there, and Iowa ended up winning 4-1. So they'll finish off this 3-3 tomorrow night in Iowa against the Wild, and then they'll play 2 games in Texas.
There you go. There's tonight's Manuk Moose Minute. We'll have more Moose coverage, of course, on tomorrow morning's Illegal Curve Hockey Show, 9 a.m. back here on our YouTube channel. Much more on tonight's game. We'll preview Sunday afternoon against the St. Louis Blues, and much more about the big coaching change. Paul Maurice out, Dave Lowry in, success still fleeting for the Winnipeg Jets. Ezzy, before we wrap the post-game show, you have a tough duck, hardest hitting comment. Who are you giving the toque to, my friend?
Yeah, we're going to give it to Dan Miller. The comment was back about 20 minutes ago, 10:18. If you could pull up the comment there, Drew.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, it's let's give Dave Lowry a few days to put his stamp on this team. To me, the biggest problem with Maurice was how he divided the ice time. Favorites get all the ice regardless of how they play. I think that's a fair comment, and I agree. We talked about it earlier in the show. I mean, like, let's not make too much out of one game, even though that's a game that you had to win because you haven't been playing your best hockey. I mean, let's give it a while here. I mean, the news happened less than 24 hours ago. And I think Dave
12
Lowry,
hours ago, Ezzy. 12 hours ago.
12 hours ago. There you go. So I think, these next 3 games are going to be huge. And yeah, I'm being a little bit optimistic here, guys, because I mean, these are not easy teams. These are, in Central Division games, but you've got to put it together here. But there's definitely, a long leash here. Lowry has been given, the interim mantle for the rest of the season. The Jets aren't going to go outside the organization and bring somebody in here. But the comment about Maurice, I think, is very fair. The ice time that was given to some of the more veteran players, there's no doubt. I mean, anybody in the organization, can speak to that. But I think, it's a different story when you've watched how some of these players have received their ice time. So I'm not saying that that's the reason why, Maurice didn't have success with this team, early on this season, but it definitely didn't help.
Congratulations to Dan Miller. He is the winner of tonight's Tough Duck hardest hitting comment. Dan, send Ezzy an email, ezra@illegalcurve.com, or slide into his DMs at ICEzzyG.
Send me your mailing address. That's what we need. Tough Duck will ship you the toque directly, Dan. So ezra@illegalcurve.com, but send me your mailing address and you don't have to do anything. They'll send you the toque and you should have it sometime next week.
There you go. Big thanks to our friends at Tough Duck for sponsoring the hardest hitting comment after each and every Winnipeg Jets post game. Again, post-game show will be Sunday afternoon, I think about 4:45, 4:30, 4:45, somewhere right around there. It's an afternoon divisional game against the St. Louis Blues. But before that, we have tomorrow morning's Illegal Curve Hockey Show, 9 a.m. back here on our YouTube channel. Our guests include our good friend from the Winnipeg Suns, Scotty Billick, and from the Toronto Star and TSN Hockey Insider, Chris Johnston. CJ going to join us in hour number 2 tomorrow. Certainly plenty to talk about throughout the NHL and here in Winnipeg, with the dismissal earlier today, the resignation, I'll be official, of Paul Maurice as Jets head coach. Dave Lowry named the interim head coach, and the Jets dropping a 5-2 decision on home ice to the Washington Capitals. Big thank you to our sponsors, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Bernstein's Deli, Tough Duck, Bagel Smith, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and Grid Park. They're our newest sponsors. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. On your way out tonight, smash the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the podcast edition of the show. It's available everywhere your best podcasts are available. Rate us, review us, subscribe to us, comment. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you dislike. For Dave Manouk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we wish you good night, good luck, and thanks for watching the Illegal Curve post-game show.